And welcome to Telewizja Republika. Russian attacks across Ukraine over the past day have killed at least 4 people and injured 42, according to regional authorities. In Donetsk Oblast, 4 people were killed and 27 injured, with casualties reported in the towns of Ukrainsk, Novodmitrivka, Selyove, and several others. In Kharkiv Oblast, a strike on Pivdenne injured 4 people and set a wheat field ablaze. Nothing new in terms of Russian activity. 9 people were injured in Kherson Oblast, and attacks were also reported in Zaporizhzhia, Chernihiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Luhansk, Mykolaiv, and Sumy Oblasts. On the front line in Donetsk region, Ukrainian paratroopers repelled assault in Novo-Mahilka, destroying 7 Russian BMP's infantry fighting vehicles and inflicting significant personal losses. The 79th Separate Air Assault Brigade reported heavy fighting with Russian forces attempting assault supported by tanks and armored vehicles. Ukrainian forces effectively countered with minefields, anti-tank missiles and drones, eliminating the attackers and their equipment. Serhiy Popko, head of the Kyiv City Military Administration, revealed that Russian forces are employing new tactics to attack Kyiv. On June 30, Russian missiles aimed at the city inflicted serious damage to a residential building, causing injuries to many residents, mainly elderly women. Nothing new in terms of Ruski's activities. Popko emphasized that the enemy is searching for optimal methods and timings to strike, indicating that Kyiv remains a high priority target for Ukraine forces. Things are going on also on the geopolitical level. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban is visiting Kyiv. It was a surprise visit on July 2nd, marking his first visit since the full-scale invasion. Orban, known for maintaining close contacts with the Russians despite their barbarity in Ukraine and for his criticism of EU sanctions on Russia, met with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. This visit coincided with Hungary assuming the rotating EU presidency. Lastly, Russian UN Ambassador Vasily Nebenzia, the bald guy from UN Security Council, we may know this person, dismissed Donald Trump's claim that he could end the Ukraine conflict in a day if elected president. Nebenzia stated that the crisis cannot be resolved so quickly, emphasizing the complexity of the situation. And of course, as always, blaming the West for blocking previous peace efforts. For God's sake, Russian peace efforts. This claim proves that the things that we very often hear from the mainstream media in the United States are not really close to the real thoughts and plans of 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. The claims made by the Russian representatives prove that what they are really scared of is the will of the United States to really end this conflict. And this could be done very easily. Russia, go home, leave the territories you have stolen. And that, of course, means that Russia needs to send back all the people, including children, Russia abducted from the territory of Ukraine. And we are talking at least about 20,000 people, and who knows, maybe even about hundreds of thousands or millions, if we are not considering children only. You can join us on rackracon.com, that's our website. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on what is going on the front lines of the ongoing war against the Western civilization. My name is Michał, and this is Rackracon. And we roll in.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
And tonight, we are joined by Mr. Andreas Umland, an analyst at the Stockholm Centre for Eastern European Studies in the Swedish Institute for International Affairs in Stockholm, and an associate professor at the Department of Political Science of the Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Mr. Umland is also the editor of the book series Soviet and Post-Soviet Politics and Society, and coordinator of the non-fiction series Ukrainian Voices, both distributed by Columbia University Press. Professor, welcome to Telewizja Republika. Great to have you on our program. I'm really proud to see a badge on your neck, which is actually a badge of my university and the University of Warsaw Eastern Studies Center. Professor, great to have you on our program.
Yeah, an honor to be at your program. I'm here currently in Warsaw at a conference at the University of Warsaw.
Professor, the article that you wrote, the article about the way and the general effects and results and the deep reasons for which Russia conducts its operations of abducting children touches upon several aspects that we very rarely look upon. What is the reason, let me start with this, what is the reason for which Russia executes this kind of criminal activity, genocidal in a way? I know it's not a directly killing of people, but in a way it is a genocide because it's destroying the fabric of the attacked society and nations, which is Ukraine nation.
Yes, this abduction, on one should say the displacement or deportation of unaccompanied Ukrainian children, that is the particular focus of my research, has a lot to do with an aspect of Russia's war against Ukraine that is obviously not advertised by Russia and therefore also often overlooked. And that is the fact that this is not only a geographic invasion, a geographic conquering of Ukraine, it's also a demographic operation that is meant to improve the demographic situation of Russia via the large-scale transfer of Ukrainians into Russia or Russia-occupied territory, their Russification, their inclusion into the Russian population, and thereby also the increase of the size of the Russian nation. And often this is not highlighted enough. Russia has obviously enough territory. What Russia is missing is a population that can sort of administer this territory. And that's why we have these transfer of civilians, including also the transfer, the illegal transfer of unaccompanied children, which is defined by the Convention on Genocide as a case of genocide, and that's why we also have now the resolution from the International Criminal Court against Vladimir Putin and the so-called Children Commissioner of Russia, Maria Lvova-Belova, because they have admitted on television openly that they are transferring Ukrainian children to within the occupied territories or to Russia. And therefore, this is a very clear case from the international legal point of a genocidal action committed by these two persons who have discussed this on Russian television quite openly.
Professor, you are also mentioning the numbers, and I must admit that the numbers are staggering. We are dealing with the issue of Russian aggression against Ukraine since day number one. Actually, we've been discussing it even before it occurred. But we hardly ever talk about the difference between the number of the children abducted by the Russian Federation and number of children that were actually brought back to their Ukrainian families. And according to your paper, this number, there is a huge difference between the first number and the second one. Could you emphasize on that? Could you explain what does it mean and what are those numbers?
First, one has to say that the number of deported or transported children is very difficult to establish. And what I'm using here in my report and in the article that came out of the report that was initially commissioned by the European Parliament, I'm using here the official Ukrainian number of almost 20,000 children that have been deported or displaced. Ukrainian children, and what is meant here are children who are not accompanied by their parents, by their legal custodians, by those people who are legally there, who have the legal right to raise them. And so we have this number of close to 20,000, but that is perhaps a low number. One can only conclude that the real number is rather lower than 20,000. And of these approximately 20,000 children, around 400 have been returned so far via different procedures, by intermediaries. Often these are countries like Qatar that you wouldn't immediately associate with the war. So this is a very low rate of return, and there's apparently no algorithm or no system to return.
So it means that we are talking about the less than 1% of probability that if a child is abducted by Russia during that war conflict, there is a less than 1% chance that this children comes back to its parents.
Well, so far, that is, for the last 2.5 years, that is the experience. One should also say that to much smaller scale, this has already happened since 2014. So there have been also deportations from Crimea, for instance, to Russia. And there's a strong suspicion that not only have children been deported, but also been already adopted by Russian families. And that would be even a more grave violation of international law, because then they become Russified. They basically lose their identity. And so this is now becoming an ever more, with basically every day of the war, it's becoming a larger crime. And it's also becoming a crime that is very difficult to reverse. Because the children, that is why the children have in the Genocide Convention a special article, because this displacement or deportation of children, or their removal from one group to another group, as the formulation in the convention goes, then can lead to actually an assimilation of the children into the nation that has committed the crime of displacement or deportation in the first place. So this is a rather stark, a very dark picture.
And this isn't anything new, because we know from the history of the Second World War that was exactly the case, the way that German Nazis behaved in the countries that they occupied. We have this history of Poland, but that's not only in Poland. What is the Sikh geopolitical criminal strategy behind this policies? We are talking about 20,000 children. This is a significant part of number of children raised, born each year in both countries, both in Russia and in Ukraine. We are probably talking about couple percent of this number in total. This can, of course, influence in a way the demographics, as you said, but in both ways. I mean, diminishing demography of Ukraine and strengthening demography of Russia.
Yeah, one should perhaps also add that what we're talking now are only the unaccompanied children. So if we would include also the children that have gone with their families, more or less forced, have been displaced within Ukraine in the occupied territories with their families, or have been deported or transported to Russia, then we're talking about much larger numbers. And here the estimates go very high, you know, if you look in the internet, actually, it becomes confusing how high. So we're talking then about hundreds of thousands of children, if we include the accompanied children who will go with
So we are talking about the numbers that match or equal or are significant part of the yearly demographic potential of states that we are talking about.
Yes, yes. This is only a very small section, these unaccompanied children. The overall population movement, displacement and occupation and Russification and deportation and so on, of course, concerns millions of Ukrainians and hundreds of thousands of children. And this number only concerns those children who have no adults with them, so to say. And I think the reason that Russia is doing it as easily and apparently not even noticing the criminality of it is a conception of the Ukrainian nation as basically not existing as a nation. So the Ukrainian nation as the small Russians, the little Russians, who are a part of the Russian nation, and that's why for Moscow this is an operation within the larger Russian nation, and that's why there is no perception of guilt or of criminality in that. I think that's also how it happened that Putin and Lvova-Belova were discussing this openly on television without noticing that they're discussing genocide, actually, because for them it was a transfer of children unaccompanied within larger Russia, within the Russian Empire. Yes, so for them there was nothing criminal about it, and on the contrary, it was a sort of a humanitarian act to take care of these unaccompanied children, to give them some home, to perhaps find a foster family for them, to perhaps even give them give them for adoption. So for them it was a humanitarian action, but from the viewpoint of international law, it's genocide.
It was also a case of international relations. We remember the issue of transferring children. Sorry that I'm using the word, but I think it's a mild word for the reality of we are talking about, to various Western states. We even heard about some kind of granting the children in Russia to foreign politicians. I don't want to get into details, but the story of adoption of Russian children by Western politicians from Europe is very well known. What is the role? What is the place of this? I even don't know how to call this whole activity in a Russian policy, because it seems to me that there is a role of a kind.
Yeah, I think the general Soviet legacy here in Russia, and perhaps also in some other countries of the post-Soviet space, like in Belarus, that has been also involved in these deportations of Ukrainian children, is that children are seen as something instrumental. That is a Soviet sort of view of children. They are sort of units in the building of the state, and they can be transferred, they can be assimilated, they can be re-educated, they can be taken away from their home, they can be given somewhere to foster families or to some or even for adoption. And there's no, this is all, children are like they're like instruments for an engineer who is trying to create some imperial nation in this case. The sort of international adoption is a common practice. It's nothing peculiar here. The thing is just that usually when children don't have parents that can take care of them or other relatives, then they become the responsibility of the state, and where they have been born, and then the state can this is the international praxis, can then decide what to do with the children, to give them to foster families, to allow adoption, to allow also international adoption, as long as the state agrees to that. The problem here with the Ukrainian unaccompanied children is that the Ukrainian state has not agreed to these displacements and deportations. So that's what makes them fundamentally illegal. And of course, these Ukrainian children will most probably in Russia or in the Russian-occupied territories not receive, let's say, Ukrainian language schooling. They will be schooled in Russian language. They may become victims of Russian propaganda. They will be fed with Russian narratives. And they may even, once they grow up, even be sent to the front line and then fight against their homeland where they have been born after, and after they have been brainwashed, they may do so even voluntarily.
Even without knowing that actually they are citizens of a different state, Ukraine, if they were young enough not to remember this, and I assume that this is also a kind of a common practice. You mentioned also in your paper, in your document, and in your text that it is very hard to discover, to investigate, to find out about the location of certain individuals. But is it possible to trace certain individual cases of children that are being abducted and they are being basically taken away from Ukraine? Do we know anything about the specific locations, maybe about the specific regions of Russia where those children are being transferred? We know from a history of Russia that this kind of practice was a common practice of Imperial Russia, even before the Bolsheviks, also during the Soviet Union times, but Tsar's Russia was also executing this kind of activity against its enemies.
Yes, this is possible to do. There have been different strategies by Ukraine and its friends to do it. One of the instruments that has been used to trace the path of the children within the occupied territories or within Russia has been hacking of internet resources by Ukrainian hackers, who have gotten access to certain databases where these children are recorded and also their movements are recorded. There have been cases of research via social networks where you people have found photographs of children they know. There has been also assistance by Russian civil society. There have been certain cases, and then if the children are old enough, then they usually, they have an identity already. They know what their name is, and then they have a certain agency themselves to ask for contact with their relatives. Often also the children have then relatives in Russia that can be then activated. So the cases are very individual, and some of these children then when they are over 18, they decide to stay in Russia because they have been brainwashed while being in Russia. Others return. So these are basically 20,000 individual fates that are very individual and specific and in each way perhaps incomparable.
Yeah, that's very important to make this thing clear. We are not talking about the numbers. We are talking about the human lives, and 20,000 different lifelines and human lives of a certain individuals. Professor, my final question. We are talking about the activity which was, or which is actually prosecuted by ICC, and this is the only international legal procedure in which Vladimir Putin and Ms. Belova are wanted by the international courts. What are the chances that Vladimir Putin will be trialed for this?
I think the chances are low. He's also old already. He's 71, so it depends on what happens in Moscow. If there's a regime change, then perhaps there is also a small chance that Putin will be brought to justice while he is still alive. Frankly, I don't think that this is very likely. It's not excluded by 100%, but I don't think it's very likely. I think he will also, if there is a regime change, he will try to flee somewhere to a country that does not follow the orders of the International Criminal Court. So unfortunately, it's unlikely that Putin will be brought to justice. With Maria Lvova-Belova, the chances are slightly higher because she could be in a different situation, be actually sent by Russia to the court in order to get for Russia some sort of to basically satisfy the criticism of the international community.
And we also know the cases of exchanging individuals like that as a bargaining chip between states, between the regimes. We are talking about the possibilities, maybe distant, but who knows, possibilities of the regime changes in Russia. That also could be the case. Professor, thank you very much for your article, for your presence in Telewizja Republika, and for your presence in university at the University of Warsaw, the Eastern Studies Center that I used to study in years ago. Thank you very much, Professor. See you soon. Hope that we are going to have a chance to talk again.
Thank you. I will be glad to speak to you again.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can join us on rackracon.com. That's our website. You can leave us your email on our Substack. You can click subscribe button on our YouTube channel, which is Rackracon, as the name of the show. We are coming back tomorrow. Stay safe. See you soon. Ciao.